Welcome to today's biology class. So in today's biology class, we are going to be looking at an important topic in biology which is known as cell specialization. And for those that are watching this as a recorded video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also comment if the video is helpful. Also, don't forget to share to your friends and save it for later. Yeah, so today's topic is cell specialization. So what exactly is cell specialization? So whenever we're talking about cell specialization, this is a process which a cell undergoes where it changes its structure and the composition of the cytoplasm. So when we are talking about cell specialization, we are saying that it is a process where the cell undergoes one specific changes in its structure and two in its cytoplasm composition. So what do we mean when we say cytoplasm composition? So whenever we say cytoplasm composition, we are saying changes like we have a thin nucleus, a thin cytoplasm, absence of chloroplast, absence of nucleus, as we will see in some cells which undergo cell specialization. Then the next thing we need to know under cell specialization are some of the examples of cell specialization. So in this video, we are going to look at about 4 types of cells which undergo cell specialization. So the first cell we are going to discuss in this video is ciliated cell. So the first cell is known as ciliated cell. So what is a ciliated cell and where is it found, and what are some of the function of a ciliated cell? So when you look at a ciliated cell, this is a type of an animal cell which has undergone cell specialization for it to perform specific functions. So you have understood that this is an animal cell. So keep in mind the structures of an animal cell. So before I start comparing these cells, we need to talk about the summary of an animal cell and a plant cell for the sake of revision. So when we are talking about an animal cell, so an animal cell looks like this. You have a nucleus and you have the cytoplasm. So this is the cell membrane. Then we have the nucleus. Then we also have the cytoplasm. Then when we talk about a plant cell looks like this. Then we have a vacuole, we have a nucleus and some chloroplast. So we have the cell membrane, the cell wall. Then we also have the cell membrane. We have the cytoplasm. we have the chloroplast, and finally but not the least, we have the nucleus. So these are the basic structure of a normal cell of an animal and a plant cell. But we are talking about this type of cells we are looking at here are modification of these two type of cells. So the cells I'm going to talk about here, I'm going to be discussing about an animal cell and a plant cell, but they have undergone changes. So our first cell we are going to be looking at is a ciliated cell. So I've told you that a ciliated cell, this is a type of an animal cell. So first, we are going to look at the changes which this ciliated cell has, which differ it from a normal animal cell. So the first difference, or the only difference which this ciliated cell has, are the presence of cilia. So a ciliated cell looks like this. Yeah, so this is a ciliated cell, the first type of cell we are going to look at in this video. So what are some of the changes? So the only change which is added to this cell is the what? The cilia. Everything is the same. It has the what? The cell membrane. It has the nucleus and the what? The cytoplasm. Yeah, so the only adaptation or the only change which is added to this cell is the cilia. So now that we have understood the changes or the change which has been added to this cell, we are going to look at where it is found and the function of the type of cells we are discussing here. So where is the ciliated cell found? So the ciliated cell is basically found in two places. One is the lining. So we are talking about the location now. One, it is found in the respiratory tract. Then two, it is found in the oviduct. Yeah. So whenever they ask you to write where the ciliated cell are found, you need to mention the two type of location. One is what? The respiratory tract, and two is what? The oviduct. Now that you know where it is found, we are going to discuss function based on location. So the function of the ciliated cell are based on their what? Location. So here we are saying function. So you say in the respiratory tract, what is the function of the what? The cilia cell or the ciliated cell. So when we're talking about in the respiratory tract, if you see this cilia, they look like air, like structure. So meaning their function is to sweep out the mucus which contains dust particles and germs. So whenever they are in the respiratory tract, because we know that the respiratory tract is responsible for breathing in and out. So meaning you can breathe in dust and germs. So the ciliated cells are there to sweep out the mucus and dust particles. containing germs. So that is the first function which you need to understand whenever you are looking at a ciliated cell. Then the second function in the oviduct. So what does the ciliated cell do in the oviduct? So when you're talking about the ciliated cell in the oviduct, its function is to move the ovum towards the uterus. So in the oviduct, we know that there is an ovum, which is an egg. So for that egg to be transported from the oviduct to the what? To the uterus, it has to be swept by what is known as the ciliated cell. So these are the two functions of the ciliated cell. We say that they move the ovum towards the uterus. Yeah. So these are the functions, location, and the changes which has been added to the animal cell, and it has changed from being an animal cell to being called a ciliated cell. So there is nothing complicated here. Whenever you see a ciliated cell, just know that this is an animal cell which has undergone what? Changes. Yeah. So next we are going to look at another cell. So this cell is known as the root hair cell. So a root hair cell looks like this. Yeah, so this is so this is how a root hair cell looks like. So again, let's name the structures before we look at where it is found. So the first structure, so before we name it, I want to tell you that this is what a plant cell, which has undergone what? Cell specialization. So when a plant undergoes cell specialization, it becomes a root hair cell. So what are some of the changes? So first, we'll start with the basic structures which we all know that a plant and an animal cell exhibit or have. So the first one is, of course, the cell wall. Then the second one is the cell membrane. Then the third is the cytoplasm. Then the fourth, we have the what? The nucleus. So if you have observed, when we compare a root hair cell and a normal plant cell, you can see that a root hair cell has the absence of chloroplast. So the first thing we are going to look at, or the first thing we are going to discuss, is the changes. So we are going to look at 1, the adaptation, 2, the location, and 3, the function. So even as you are studying, these are the 3 things which you need to be studying whenever you are studying a root hair cell. Look at the adaptation, look at the location, and also the function. Yeah. So what are some of the adaptation, or what are some of the changes which a root hair cell undergoes? So the first one, we can see that it has the absence of chloroplast. So some of you might ask, why does it have chloroplast absent, or what does it have the absence of chloroplast? So the reason is the location of this type of cell. So this type of cell is found at the tips of the roots. So it is found at the tips of the roots. So because it is found at the tips of the root, it does not need chloroplast, because we say that chloroplasts are responsible for performing what? Photosynthesis. But we know that photosynthesis only takes place in leaves, so it does not take place in roots. So that's why the root hair cell has absence of chloroplast, so that it can create more room for absorption and what? Transporting of minerals. Yeah. So that's the first adaptation. We are saying that it has the absence of chloroplast. Then the second thing is, if you compare these two cells, you can see that the root hair cell has this part which is extended. So this part is known as an elongated outgrowth. So this part is also an addition to the what? To the root hair cell. So it has elongated outgrowth. Yeah. So now this brings us to our question now. What is its function? Because we are seeing that it has the absence of the chloroplast. Also it has an elongated outgrowth. And also it is located at the tips of the roots. What is it doing at the tips of the roots? So we know that plants mainly absorb minerals and water from the roots. So if this cell is found at the tips of the roots, meaning its function is to what? Absorb water and mineral salt. So this cell absorbs water and mineral salts. Yeah. And the second function is, because it is near the tips of the roots, and we also know that the roots anchors the what? The plant to the ground, or keeps the plant to the ground. So another function of this cell is to anchor the plant to the ground. So these are the things, or these are the notes which you need to know whenever you are looking at the root hair cell. So the first thing is, it has the absence of a chloroplast. It has an elongated outgrowth to increase the surface area for what? For diffusion. And another one, you can see that it has a large vacuum. So we said that in the previous video, we said that the vacuum is responsible for the absorption of water and the minerals. So meaning if it has a large it will increase the absorption and what? The movement of water in and out of the plant. So this is where our first part of cell specialization ends. So be sure to like, follow and comment on the video.